The woman on her knees in the middle of the grand hall was shaking so hard the scattered glass around her made small chiming sounds every time her breath hitched, and every vampire in the room had gone completely, utterly still. Genevieve Grant had been walking the length of the hall with a tray of wine glasses, old crystal, too delicate for the dishwasher upstairs in the depot's break room when someone had moved too fast behind her. Just a blur in her peripheral vision. Just speed. Her body had done what it always did now, jerked away, overcompensated, sent everything crashing to the stone floor. And now she was here, kneeling in the wreckage, trying to breathe through the tightness in her chest while 200 immortals watched her fall apart. She knew they were watching. She could feel the weight of it, the pressure of all those ancient eyes. No one was moving. No one was even pretending to look away. The crash had ripped through the pre-dawn gathering like a gunshot, and now the entire court was frozen, waiting to see what happened next. Genevieve pressed her palms flat against the cold floor and tried to slow her heart. The stone was gritty under her hands, centuries of dust worked into the mortar. Somewhere above them, a tram rattled through the depot, metal wheels shrieking against the rails. The vibration traveled down through the hidden stairs, through the walls, into the bones of this place that should not exist beneath a working transit station in the middle of Prague. She had been working here for 3 months. 3 months of tuning the court's pianos, caring for instruments so old they predated the city above. 3 months of learning to move through a world that operated on rules she barely understood. And she still could not stop her body from betraying her every time something moved too quickly in her line of sight. The crash had been 8 months ago. Her brother's car, T-boned at an intersection by a driver who ran a red light. Genevieve had been in the passenger seat. Daniel had died before the ambulance arrived. She had walked away with a fractured collarbone and a nervous system that no longer trusted the world to stay predictable. Do not move. The voice came from the far end of the hall, and it was not loud, but it carried. Genevieve's shoulders went rigid. She knew that voice. Everyone in this court knew that voice. Tiberius Tenebris, vampire king of the Bohemian court, sounded almost amused. "I am going to walk toward you now," he continued, still from that safe distance. "I will not be fast. You will hear every step. I am starting now." The first footfall echoed. Genevieve squeezed her eyes shut, then forced them open again. Closing her eyes made it worse. She needed to see. Another step. Measured, deliberate. She could track the sound across the hall, could picture exactly where he was even though she had not lifted her head yet. The king was tall, over 6 feet, with the bone-white skin and colorless hair that marked all of his kind. She had seen him before, of course, though usually only at a distance. He kept to the inner chambers mostly, left the management of the public halls to his stewards and bloodsworn. But he was here now, walking toward her with the careful pace of someone approaching a frightened animal, and Genevieve felt humiliation burn through her chest. Another step. "I am 10 feet away," he said. His accent was old, shaped by centuries she could not fathom, but his English was perfect. "I am going to stop at 5 feet. You will see me before I arrive." She made herself look up. He was exactly where he said he would be, still several paces distant, hands loose at his sides. He wore dark clothing the vampires here always did, formal and old-fashioned even by their standards, but no crown, no visible symbols of rank. He did not need them. Authority came off him like heat. His eyes were pale, nearly silver, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to look away. She did not. Something stubborn in her refused to give him that too. 5 feet, he said, and stopped. The hall was still silent. Genevieve could hear her own breathing, ragged and too fast. "I am going to crouch now," the king said, slowly. "Watch my hands." He folded downward with inhuman grace, controlled and smooth until he was at her level. His hands remained in view the entire time, open and empty. "You are Genevieve Grant," he said. It was not a question. "The instrument keeper." She nodded. Her throat was too tight to answer aloud. "You have very good ears," he continued. "The Erard in the East Wing has not sounded that clear in decades. I am told you can hear the difference in resonance that age makes in wood. A mortal skill. Irreplaceable." Genevieve swallowed hard. I'm sorry, she managed. The glasses are replaceable, he said. You are not. I am going to stand now, and then I am going to step back 3 paces. Count them with me. He rose, still slow, still controlled, and then stepped backward. 1. A pause. 2. Another pause. 3. He was farther away now, giving her space, giving her room to breathe. The staff will clean this, he said. You do not need to touch the glass. I would like you to stand when you are ready, and I would like you to go to the kitchens and ask for tea. Something sweet. The staff there knows what to prepare after a shock. Will you do that? It was phrased as a question, but it had the structure of a command. Genevieve found that easier somehow. Instructions she could follow. She nodded again. Good, the king said. I am going to turn around now. Slowly, and then I am going to walk away. You will hear my footsteps the entire time. He did exactly what he said he would do, turned, slowly enough that she could see every degree of rotation, and then walked back across the hall with that same deliberate pace. The crowd parted for him soundlessly, and within moments the spell of stillness broke. Vampires began moving again, voices rising in conversation, though Genevieve noticed that everyone was moving more slowly than usual, more carefully. Because of her. Because she was broken in a way that made sudden movement unbearable, and now they all knew it. A woman appeared at her elbow, another vampire, white-haired and elegant, wearing the dark blue sash of the king's household staff. Come, she said quietly. Let us get you out of here. Genevieve let herself be guided to her feet, let herself be led through the crowd toward the servants' door at the side of the hall. She kept her eyes down, did not look at the faces turning to watch her go. The humiliation was a physical weight in her chest, crushing and hot. She had needed this job, needed the money, yes, instrument work paid decently, but not well enough to cover Prague rent and her brother's funeral expenses both. But more than that, she had needed something that made sense. Pianos had rules. Strings and hammers and soundboards followed physical laws that did not care about trauma or fear. She could tune a piano in the dark and it would still be perfect when she finished. The world above had stopped making sense after the crash, but down here, in the strange hidden court beneath the tram depot, she had found work that her hands still remembered how to do. And now she had shattered that fragile stability on the floor of the grand hall in front of everyone who mattered. The kitchens were warm and smelled of bread and copper. The staff there did know what to prepare. Black tea with honey and a plate of small pastries that Genevieve could not imagine eating. She sat at the scarred wooden table in the corner and wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the heat sink into her palms. The woman who had guided her here, she had introduced herself as Isolde. Head of housekeeping sat across from her and waited. I should go, Genevieve said finally. I'll pack my tools and go. I'm sorry. Why? Isolde's voice was calm, genuinely curious. Because Genevieve gestured helplessly. I fell apart in front of the entire court. I'm not. You dropped a tray, Isolde said. This happens. We are immortal, Miss Grant, not immune to broken dishes. It's not the dishes, Genevieve said, her voice cracked. It's me. I can't when people move fast. Yes, Isolde said. We noticed. And now we will move more carefully around you. This is not difficult. Genevieve stared at her. You can't ask an entire court of vampires to slow down because one human has issues. The king already did, Isolde said simply. Before you reached the kitchens, the decree went out. No sudden movement in your presence, no speed unless you are secured elsewhere. It will be observed. That's... Genevieve did not know what it was. Absurd, humiliating, impossibly kind. I don't understand. Isolde tilted her head, studying Genevieve with those ageless pale eyes. You are valuable, she said. Your skill is rare. The king values rare things. He will accommodate you. He shouldn't have to, Genevieve said. I should be able to just handle it, to not fall apart every time something startles me. Should is a useless word, Isolde said. You are as you are. The crash that damaged you was not your fault. Your body's response is not a moral failing. It simply is, and we will adapt. Genevieve felt something crack open in her chest. She had spent 8 months apologizing for her broken reflexes, 8 months trying to force herself back into the shape of the person she used to be. No one had ever just accepted it. Adapted. "Drink your tea," Isolde said, not unkindly. "And then, if you are able, there is a harpsichord in the lower gallery that needs your attention. The humidity down here does terrible things to gut strings, but if you need the rest of the night to recover, that is also acceptable." Genevieve drank the tea. It was too sweet, but the warmth of it steadied her. When she finished, she stood, collected her tools from the workroom, and went to find the harpsichord. She could do this. She could still do this. The harpsichord was even older than she had expected. The case decorated with hand-painted flowers, so faded they were barely visible. Genevieve ran her fingers over the keys, testing the action, listening to the thin, bright sound of plucked strings. Several were false, the tone warped. She would need to replace them. She was elbow-deep in the instrument's interior, measuring out new gut string, when she heard footsteps behind her. Slow footsteps, deliberately loud. "I am entering the gallery," the king's voice said. "I will stop 10 feet from your position." Genevieve froze, a length of string still pinched between her fingers. The footsteps stopped exactly where he said they would. She turned, slowly, and found him standing in the arched doorway, hands clasped behind his back. "You are working," he observed. "Good. I worried we had frightened you away." Isolde said. Genevieve stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. "Isolde said you gave orders. Isolde said you changed the rules for me." She said the harpsichord needed attention. "It does," the king agreed. "It is 17th century. French. I acquired it in 1702 and have moved it from court to court ever since. It deserves better than the current climate is giving it." 1702. Genevieve's mind stuttered over the date, over the casual way he said it, as if 300 years were nothing. "I will do my best," she said. "I know," he said. "I have heard you work. You are meticulous." There was a pause. Genevieve turned back to the harpsichord, hoping he would leave, but the footsteps did not retreat. "I'm going to sit," the king said. "There is a bench against the wall to your left. I will lower myself onto it now. Watch, if you like." She did not want to watch, but her eyes betrayed her, flicking to the left as he moved. He sat exactly as he had described, the motion slow and fluid, and then settled with his hands resting on his knees. "You may continue working," he said. "I will not move from this spot unless I tell you first. I simply wish to be certain you are all right." "I'm fine," Genevieve said automatically. "You are competent," he corrected. "That is not the same as fine. But competence is enough for now." She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She turned back to the harpsichord and threaded the new string through the tuning pin, her hands finding the familiar rhythm of the work. Behind her, the king was utterly silent. No breathing, no fidgeting. She had grown used to that with the vampires. They did not need to breathe except to speak, did not shift with discomfort or boredom the way humans did. But somehow his stillness was different. Watchful. Present. "Why do you care?" she asked finally, not turning around. "About the glasses. About this. You are a member of this household," he said. "Your well-being is my responsibility." "I'm just a contractor," Genevieve said. "I tune pianos. That doesn't make me part of your household." "You work within these walls," the king said. "You eat food prepared in our kitchens. You are protected under my name and my seal. That makes you mine to care for. Whether you are contracted or blood-sworn, the principle is the same." The possessive phrasing should have alarmed her. It did not, or rather it did, but not in the way she expected. There was something almost reassuring about it, something solid. "I am going to stand now," he said, "and I am going to leave, but I will return tomorrow at this time if you are working. I find I enjoy watching craftsmanship. It has been a long time since I took the time to simply observe someone work. You may tell me if my presence is unwelcome." "It's your court," Genevieve said. "You can go where you want." "That is not what I asked." She turned then, meeting his pale eyes across the dim gallery. "It's fine," she said. You can You can stay, if you want. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Then I will return tomorrow, he said. I am walking to the door now. 5 steps. You can count them. He walked away, each footfall clear and deliberate, and Genevieve did count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then he was gone, and she was alone with the harpsichord and the strange, unfamiliar sensation of being seen not as broken, not as fragile, but as someone worth the effort of accommodation. She worked for another 2 hours, replacing strings and adjusting the voicing until the instrument sang the way it was meant to. When she finally packed her tools and made her way back to the surface, the sun was just beginning to rise over Prague, pale winter lights slanting through the depot's high windows. The city was waking up. Trams clattered along their routes, commuters hurried toward the metro stations, delivery trucks rumbled over cobblestones. Genevieve walked through it all with her hands shoved deep in her coat pockets, her breath misting in the cold air. She did not flinch when a tram rattled past, did not jump when a car honked somewhere down the street. The world above was full of sudden noises, unexpected movements, but somehow after the stillness of the court, after the careful deliberation of the king's voice, it felt less threatening. Or maybe she was just too tired to be afraid. She took the metro home to her tiny flat in Zhizkov, climbed the 4 flights of stairs, and collapsed into bed without bothering to undress. She slept hard and dreamless, and when she woke in the late afternoon, she found herself thinking about the way the king had crouched down to her level, hands open and empty, giving her space to breathe. No one had done that before. Not the therapist the hospital had referred her to, who kept pushing exposure therapy and breathing exercises. Not her friends, who had eventually stopped inviting her to things because she could not handle crowds or loud bars or anywhere with too much movement. Not her parents, who loved her but did not understand why she could not just move on. The king had simply adapted, had seen what she needed and provided it without question, without judgment. Genevieve pulled a blanket around her shoulders and stared at the ceiling. She should not read too much into it. He was a king. He was responsible for everyone in his household. She was useful to him, and useful things were worth maintaining. That was all. But when she returned to the depot that evening, descended the hidden stairs into the court below, she found herself hoping he would keep his word, that he would come to the gallery again. He did. Every night for a week, Tiberius Tenebris appeared in the lower gallery exactly when he said he would. He always announced himself from a distance, always moved slowly, always asked permission before entering the space, and then he would sit on the bench against the wall and watch her work in silence. At first, it was unnerving. Genevieve had never been comfortable with people watching her. Too much pressure, too much awareness of her own hands and the possibility of mistakes. But the king did not critique, did not comment, did not even ask questions. He simply observed, still and patient, and gradually she stopped noticing him. Or rather, she noticed him the way she noticed the texture of the wood under her fingers, or the tension in a newly strung wire present, but integrated into the rhythm of the work. On the 8th night, he spoke. "May I ask a question?" Genevieve paused, a tuning hammer balanced in her hand. "All right. The crash," he said carefully. "The one that made you as you are now. You were in the vehicle?" She nodded, not looking at him. "Passenger seat. My brother was driving." "And he did not survive?" "No." There was a long silence. Then, "I am sorry. Loss of family is—" He paused, searching for words. "There is no hierarchy of grief, but sibling loss is particular. A future unmade. I am sorry." Genevieve set down the tuning hammer. Her hands were shaking. "Everyone says that," she said. "I'm sorry for your loss. It's awful. It must be so hard. But no one knows what to do with me after they say it. Like saying it fulfills some obligation and now they can move on." "I do not wish to move on," the king said. "I am asking because I wish to understand. But if the question is unwelcome, I will not press." She turned to face him. He was still sitting exactly where he had been, hands resting on his knees, expression serious. It happened at an intersection, Genevieve said. The words came slowly, dragged up from somewhere deep. We were going through a green light. The other car ran the red. I saw it coming just for a second, just this blur in the window, and then impact. Everything was noise and glass, and then it was over. Daniel was gone. I was still there. And now my body can't forget that moment, can't stop bracing for the next impact. Every time something moves too fast, every time I see motion I'm not expecting, I'm back in that car. Your body is trying to protect you, the king said quietly. It believes the danger has not passed. The danger has passed, Genevieve said. It's been 8 months. I should be over it by now. Should, the king said, echoing Isolde's dismissal. A tyrant of a word. Your body will heal when it heals. You cannot force it to a schedule. You sound like you know something about it, Genevieve said. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. I am very old, Miss Grant. I have seen many kinds of wounds. The ones that leave no visible scar often take the longest to heal. How old? The question was out before she could stop it. Sorry, am I allowed to ask that? You are allowed to ask me anything you like, he said. I may choose not to answer, but you will not offend me. I was born in the year 1142. I have been king of this court for just over 400 years. Genevieve's mind reeled. 1142, nearly 900 years. He had lived through the entire history of this city, through the rise and fall of empires, through wars and plagues and revolutions. And here he was, sitting in a basement gallery beneath a tram depot, watching her restring a harpsichord. That's I can't even imagine, she said. Most days neither can I, he said, and this time the curve of his mouth was definitely a smile. Time is strange when you have too much of it. Centuries blur together. I remember the 12th century more clearly than I remember the 20th, but certain moments stay sharp. Meeting someone new, learning something worth knowing. Those moments accumulate. They are what makes the years bearable. Is that why you come here? Genevieve asked. To watch me work? Because it's what, a sharp moment? Yes, he said simply. You are interesting. Your skill is interesting. And I find I enjoy the novelty of having to move slowly. It has been a very long time since I had to consider my own speed. Genevieve did not know what to say to that. So she turned back to the harpsichord, but she was smiling as she picked up the tuning hammer. The weeks folded into each other. Genevieve settled into the rhythm of the court, learning its strange rules and hierarchies, its blend of old-world formality and modern infrastructure. The vampires moved carefully around her. Now she never saw speed unless she was safely tucked into a workroom with the door closed, and gradually, incrementally, her body began to believe that she was safe here. The king continued his visits. Sometimes he sat in silence watching her work. Sometimes he asked questions about her training, about the instruments she cared for, about her life before the crash. She found herself answering more freely than she expected, found that his attention was not invasive but genuinely curious. He listened the way he moved, with complete focus, nothing rushed. In return, he told her stories. About the courts he had ruled, the cities he had seen, the changes he had witnessed. He spoke of the Black Death and the 30 Years' War, of the failed revolution of 1848 and the Nazi occupation and the Velvet Revolution. He had been in Prague for all of it, moving his court from location to location as the city transformed around him. We were in the catacombs under Vyshegrád for most of the 19th century, he said one night. Before that, a monastery cellar in Mala Strana. This depot is relatively new. We moved here in 1974, when the transit authority expanded and left this section unused. It suits us. The noise above provides excellent cover. Do humans know? Genevieve asked. That you're here? Some do, he said. There are treaties, agreements, the Hunters Guild particularly. We have maintained an uneasy peace for centuries. They know where we are, we know where they are, and we both agree that open conflict serves no one. Hunters, Genevieve repeated. Like people who kill vampires? People who regulate us, the king corrected. Though killing is within their purview if we break the terms. The treaties exist to prevent slaughter on both sides. We agree to certain limitations: no unconsented feeding, no turning of minors, no visibility to the general public, and they agree not to purge us. It is a functional system, most of the time. Most of the time? His expression darkened slightly. There are always those who resent the treaties, on both sides. Vampires who believe we should rule openly, humans who believe we should not exist at all. The tension is managed, but it is never fully resolved. Genevieve thought about that as she worked, thought about the precarious balance the king maintained, the weight of it. 400 years of negotiation and compromise and carefully managed peace. That sounds exhausting, she said. It is, he said, but it is also necessary, and I am well suited to it. I am patient. I am old enough to remember what open war looks like. I will do a great deal to avoid returning to that. There was something in his voice, a weariness, a depth of experience that made Genevieve's chest ache. She set down her tools and turned to face him fully. Can I ask you something? Always. Why do you spend time with me? She asked. I mean, really, you're a king. You have a whole court to manage, treaties to maintain, centuries of politics to navigate. Why waste time sitting in a gallery watching someone tune instruments? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood slowly, still slow, and crossed the room until he was a few feet from where she sat, close enough that she could see the faint silver tracery of veins beneath his pale skin, the way his hair caught the low light. You are not a waste of time, he said quietly. You are... He paused, searching for words. When you work, you are completely present, focused. You do not think about what I am or what you should say to me. You simply do the work that needs doing. It is refreshing and rare. Most people in my presence are performing. You are simply yourself. Genevieve felt heat rise in her face. I don't know how to perform for a vampire king, she said. I barely know how to be around people anymore. Yes, he said. I know. That is part of what makes you restful. Restful. She had never thought of herself that way. Broken, yes. Difficult, a burden, but restful. I am going to do something, the king said. And I am going to move very slowly, and you may stop me at any time. I am going to extend my hand, just my hand. You do not have to take it, but I would like to offer it. He lifted his right hand, palm up, and held it in the space between them. The motion took several seconds, so slow she could track every muscle. Genevieve stared at his hand. It was pale, long-fingered, utterly still. No tremor, no impatience, just an offering. She reached out and placed her hand in his. His skin was cool, not cold, but noticeably less warm than a human's. His fingers closed around hers gently, carefully, and she felt the shocking strength in them. He could crush every bone in her hand without effort, but he did not. He simply held her, steady and present. Thank you, he said quietly, for trusting me this much. Genevieve's throat was tight. You've been careful, she said. Since the beginning. You made it easy. Good, he said. That was my intent. They stood like that for a moment, hands linked, and then he released her and stepped back. Slowly, always slowly. I should let you finish your work, he said, but I will return tomorrow, if you will have me. Yes, Genevieve said. Yes, I'd like that. He smiled then, a real smile, and it transformed his face entirely, made him look less like a distant king and more like a man who had just been given something he wanted. Tomorrow then, he said, and left with those same careful footsteps. Genevieve stood in the empty gallery, her hands still tingling from the coolness of his touch, and realized with a jolt that she was happy, that for the first time since the crash she was looking forward to tomorrow. The realization should have frightened her. She was developing feelings for a vampire, for a king, for someone so far outside her world that the distance should have been unbridgeable. But instead of fear, she felt something closer to wonder. Maybe this was allowed. Maybe she was allowed to want something good. The thought stayed with her as she finished her work and made her way back to the surface. The city was deep in the winter dark now, snow beginning to fall in soft, fat flakes. Genevieve tilted her face up to catch them, felt the cold melt against her skin. She did not flinch when a tram roared past, did not jump when a group of students spilled out of a bar, laughing and loud. She walked through the snowy streets with her hands in her pockets and let herself feel the fragile, tentative hope growing in her chest. Maybe she could heal. Maybe she was already healing. Maybe the king was part of that. The next evening, Tiberius did not come to the gallery. Genevieve told herself it did not matter. He was a king. He had responsibilities. She could not expect him to spend every night watching her work. But the gallery felt emptier without him. The silence was too large. She worked for an hour, restless and unfocused, before Isolde appeared in the doorway. "Miss Grant," she said, "the king requests your presence in the receiving hall, if you are willing." Genevieve set down her tools. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong," Isolde said carefully. "But there are complications. He wishes to speak with you." The receiving hall was smaller than the grand hall, more intimate, with vaulted ceilings and walls lined with old tapestries. The king was standing near the center of the room, hands clasped behind his back, looking unusually tense. He was not alone. There was another vampire with him, male, white-haired and pale like all of them, but with a sharper edge to his features. He wore formal clothing and an expression of barely concealed disdain. "Ah," the stranger said when Genevieve entered. "The mortal." Tiberius's expression darkened. "Lord Draven, you will speak of her with respect or you will leave." "Of course," Draven said, though his tone suggested anything but agreement. "Forgive me. Miss Grant, is it? I am Lord Draven Duskborn, representative of the Northern Court. I have come to discuss certain irregularities in His Majesty's household." Genevieve looked to Tiberius, confused. He met her eyes, and something in his expression softened. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I did not expect this tonight. But you should hear it directly. Lord Draven believes I am in violation of blood law." "Blood law?" Genevieve repeated. "The codes that govern our interactions with mortals," Draven said smoothly. "Specifically the law that forbids keeping a human in a state of fear. Consent given under duress is not lawful consent, and I have it on good authority that Miss Grant here flinches every time a vampire moves in her presence, that she is visibly afraid, which calls into question whether her service here is truly voluntary." Genevieve felt the floor tilt under her. That's not... I'm not afraid of... You flinch, Draven said. "This is documented. You cannot deny it." "I flinch because I have a startle reflex," Genevieve said, anger rising in her chest. "Not because anyone here has hurt me. The king he's been nothing but kind." "Kind," Draven repeated, as if tasting the word. "How generous. But kindness does not erase fear, Miss Grant, and fear invalidates consent. If you are kept here in a state of terror, then His Majesty's household is unlawful, and his position as king can be challenged." Tiberius moved then not toward Draven, but toward Genevieve. Slowly, still slow, until he was close enough to speak quietly. "This is politics," he said. "Lord Draven represents a faction that has long opposed my rule. They have been searching for grounds to challenge me. Your presence here has given them an opening." "But I don't want to..." Genevieve's mind was racing. "I'm not afraid of you, I'm not. I believe you," Tiberius said gently. "But belief is not sufficient under blood law. There must be proof, testimony, evidence that your consent is freely given." "Then I'll testify," Genevieve said. "I'll tell them. Words are not enough," Draven interrupted. "Not when your body tells a different story. You flinch, Miss Grant, you shake, you cannot control it. How can we trust your words when your flesh betrays you?" Genevieve wanted to scream, wanted to throw something. The unfairness of it choked her, that her trauma, her body's honest response to what had been done to it, was being weaponized against the one person who had actually helped her. "What would be enough?" she asked, rounding on Draven. "What proof would satisfy you?" Draven smiled. It was not a kind expression. "Blood law is ancient, Miss Grant. It recognizes certain gestures as binding, certain demonstrations of trust. If you wish to prove that you are not kept in fear, you would need to show fearlessness, in a way the court cannot dispute." "Such as?" Tiberius's voice was dangerously quiet. "There is a traditional test," Draven said, "for mortals who claim to serve vampires willingly. A test of trust, administered in full view of the assembled houses. The mortal must touch the vampire's fangs, with her own hands, at her own pace, no coercion, no glamour, no assistance. If she can do this without flinching, without hesitation, her consent is considered proven." Genevieve's breath caught. She looked at Tiberius, whose expression had gone carefully blank. "That is barbaric," he said flatly, "and unnecessary." "That is the law," Draven countered. "Old law, yes, but never repealed. If Miss Grant can pass the test, your household is lawful and my challenge dies. If she cannot—" He shrugged. "Well, we shall see." "And if I refuse the test?" Genevieve asked. "Then the challenge proceeds," Draven said. "His Majesty's rule is called into question. The treaty signing scheduled for next week, the one with the Hunters Guild, meant to renew our peace for another century, that collapses. The Guild will not negotiate with a disputed king, and everything King Tiberius has worked to build falls apart, all because one traumatized mortal cannot control her own fear." The words landed like blows. Genevieve felt the weight of them, the impossible choice being laid at her feet. Prove herself or destroy everything. "There is another option," Tiberius said quietly. "You could leave tonight, resign your position, return to your life above. Without you in my household, Lord Draven's challenge has no grounds. And you lose your instrument keeper," Genevieve said. "And I lose—" She stopped. She had been about to say, "I lose you." But she could not say that in front of Draven, could not give him that ammunition. "You lose nothing that matters," Tiberius said, and the gentleness in his voice nearly broke her. "Your safety is worth more than any treaty." "I disagree," Genevieve said. She turned to Draven. "When is this test? When do I have to do it?" "The treaty signing is in 6 days," Draven said. "The test should be administered the night before, in front of the assembled representatives. It will be dramatic, but conclusive." "Fine," Genevieve said. "I'll do it." "Genevieve," Tiberius started, but she cut him off. "I'll do it," she repeated. "You've spent months moving slowly for me, making this place safe. I'm not going to let some political vulture destroy that, because he thinks I'm too broken to know my own mind." Draven's smile widened. "How brave," he said. "We shall see if your courage holds in 6 days' time, Your Majesty." He inclined his head in a mockery of a bow and swept from the room. The silence he left behind was crushing. Tiberius turned to Genevieve, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked genuinely shaken. "You should not have agreed to that," he said. "I will not ask you to—" "You're not asking," Genevieve said. "I'm offering. There's a difference." "You are terrified of sudden movement," he said. "Of anything you cannot predict. Touching a vampire's fangs requires you to move your hands into my mouth, to touch the sharpest part of me, and to do it in front of hundreds of witnesses. That is not slow. That is not predictable. That is every fear you have made manifest." "I know," Genevieve said. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together to still them. "I know what I'm agreeing to, but I also know what happens if I don't, and I—" She met his eyes. "I trust you. I do. You've never hurt me. You've never even come close. If I can touch your fangs, it's because you'll let me. Because you'll stay still." "I will be utterly still," Tiberius said. "I swear it. But the room will not be. There will be people watching, moving, breathing. You will not be able to control the space the way you need to." "Then I'll practice," Genevieve said. "I have 6 days. Teach me. Show me what I need to do." He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw the war playing out behind his eyes. The desire to protect her versus the knowledge that she was right, that this was the only path forward. "All right," he said finally. "But we do this carefully. We build up to it. And if at any point you wish to stop—" "I won't," Genevieve said. "If at any point you wish to stop," he repeated firmly, "you stop. No shame, no consequence. Do you understand?" She nodded. "Then we begin tonight," he said. "But first, I am going to move toward you, slowly, and I'm going to take your hands. May I?" "Yes." He crossed the space between them with that same deliberate care, and when he took her hands in his, she felt the coolness of his skin, the steady strength of him. "You are the bravest person I have ever met," he said quietly, "and I have met conquerors and kings." Genevieve's throat was tight. "I don't feel brave." "Bravery is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is the choice to move forward despite it. You are choosing. That is what matters. He lifted her hands to his lips slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, and it sent warmth flooding through her chest. "We will do this together," he said, "and I will keep you safe. I promise." Genevieve believed him. They started that night, in a private chamber far from the main halls. Tiberius sat in a chair, hands resting on the armrests, and talked Genevieve through the process. "Vampires can retract our fangs," he explained. "But for the test to be valid, they must be extended, visible. You will need to touch them while they are fully descended." How sharp are they?" Genevieve asked. "Sharp enough to pierce skin with very little pressure," he said. "But I will not bite. I will not even close my mouth unless you ask me to. You will be in complete control." He demonstrated, opening his mouth slightly. His canines elongated, sliding down into sharp, wickedly curved points. They gleamed in the low light, whiter than bone. Genevieve's pulse kicked up. Those were weapons. Predator's teeth. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to step back, to put distance between herself and the danger. But she did not step back. "I am going to retract them now," Tiberius said, and the fangs slid back up into his gums, disappearing. "We will work up to touching them. First, I simply want you to be comfortable being close to me when they are extended. That is all. Just proximity." They spent an hour on proximity. Tiberius extended his fangs and held still while Genevieve stood a few feet away, breathing through the panic, letting her body adjust to the sight of them. He talked to her the entire time, his voice low and steady, grounding her. "You are doing well," he said. "Your breathing is evening out. That is progress." "I feel like I'm going to throw up," Genevieve admitted. "That is also normal," he said. "Fear is physical. Your body is processing a perceived threat. But I am not a threat to you. I will never be a threat to you." By the end of the hour, Genevieve could stand 3 feet from him with his fangs extended and not shake. It was not much, but it was something. "That is enough for tonight," Tiberius said, retracting his fangs. "You have done more than I expected. Rest. We will continue tomorrow." Genevieve nodded, exhausted, but as she turned to leave, he caught her hand. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for doing this, for trusting me this much." "Thank you for making it possible," she said. Over the next 5 days, they built the trust inch by inch. Genevieve learned to stand close to Tiberius with his fangs extended. Learned to watch him without flinching. Learned to reach out and touch his face, his jaw, the cool skin near his mouth. He never moved unless he told her first. Never rushed, never pushed. He let her set the pace, let her retreat when she needed to, and praised every small step forward. "You are touching my lower lip now," he said on the 3rd night. "That is excellent progress. The fangs are only slightly higher. You are nearly there." "It feels like miles," Genevieve said, her fingers trembling against his mouth. "Miles are crossed 1 step at a time," he said. "You are doing beautifully." On the 4th night, she touched the tip of one fang, just the very point, the barest brush of her fingertip against the sharp edge. It was cool and hard, like polished stone. "I did it," she whispered. "You did," Tiberius said, his voice warm with pride. "You touched my fang, Genevieve. You did it." She pulled her hand back, staring at her finger. There was no wound, no blood. Just the ghost of sensation, the memory of that dangerous edge. "Again," she said. "I want to do it again." They practiced until she could touch both fangs without shaking, until she could run her fingers along the curve of them and feel the sharpness without panic. It was not easy. Some attempts ended with her pulling back, overwhelmed. But Tiberius never showed impatience, never made her feel like she was failing. "You are learning to trust your own courage," he said. "That takes time." On the 5th night, the night before the test, Genevieve sat across from him in the private chamber and said, "Tell me the truth. Do you think I can do this in front of the court?" Tiberius was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think you can do anything you set your mind to, but I also think it will be harder tomorrow than it has been here. The crowd, the attention, the pressure. Those are variables we cannot practice. You may find it overwhelming. And if I fail? Genevieve asked. If I can't do it in front of everyone? Then I lose my crown, he said simply. And the treaty collapses. And we go to war, most likely. The hunters will see a disputed throne as an opportunity to strike. It will be bloody and terrible and entirely my fault for allowing this situation to develop. Your fault? Genevieve stared at him. How is any of this your fault? I knew Lord Draven was looking for ammunition, Tiberius said. I knew my interest in you would be noticed. I should have been more careful, should have kept more distance. I'm glad you didn't, Genevieve said quietly. He looked up at her, surprise flickering across his face. I'm glad you came to the gallery, she continued. I'm glad you talked to me. I'm glad you... She stopped, searching for words. You made me feel like I could still be a whole person, even broken. That's worth more than any treaty. Tiberius stood slowly, always slowly, and crossed to where she sat. He knelt in front of her, bringing them to eye level. You are not broken, he said. You are healing. There is a difference. I don't feel healed, Genevieve said. Healing is not a destination, he said. It is a process, and you are in the middle of it. That is enough. Genevieve reached out and cupped his face in her hands. He went utterly still, letting her touch him, letting her trace the line of his jaw, the sharp edge of his cheekbone. I'm going to do this tomorrow, she said. I'm going to touch your fangs in front of everyone, and I'm going to prove that I chose this, that I chose you. Something fierce and bright blazed in his eyes. I do not deserve you, he said. Probably not, Genevieve said, and felt a smile tug at her mouth. But you're stuck with me anyway. He laughed, a surprised, delighted sound, and leaned forward to press his forehead against hers. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, gathering strength. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said quietly, know that you have already given me something precious. You have reminded me what it is to care for someone beyond duty, beyond politics. I had forgotten that was possible. I love you, Genevieve said. The words fell out before she could stop them, but once they were spoken, she did not want to take them back. I know we've only known each other a few months, and you're a vampire king, and I'm just a piano tuner, and this is probably the worst possible timing, but I love you. I needed you to know that before tomorrow. Tiberius pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. You love me, he repeated, as if testing the words. Yes, Genevieve said. A vampire, he said. A creature who could kill you without effort, who has lived centuries beyond your lifespan, who comes with crowns and courts and ancient enemies. Yes, Genevieve said, all of that. I love you anyway. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with something that looked almost like tears, though she knew vampires could not cry. I have lived 900 years, he said. I have ruled courts and waged wars and brokered peace across continents. And in all that time, I have never heard words that mattered more than those. I love you, Genevieve Grant. I love your courage and your skill and your stubborn refusal to be defined by your wounds. I love the way you hear music in old wood and broken strings. I love that you are here, in my court, in my life, despite every reason to be elsewhere. I love you. Genevieve kissed him. It was not slow. It was not careful. It was sudden and fierce, and full of all the emotion she had been holding back for months. And Tiberius kissed her back with a hunger that made her forget to be afraid, that made the world narrow down to just the two of them, tangled together in the quiet dark. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tiberius rested his forehead against hers again. Tomorrow, he said. We face tomorrow together. Together, Genevieve agreed. The receiving hall was packed. Genevieve stood in the doorway, looking out at the sea of pale faces, and felt her courage waver. There had to be 200 vampires in the room, representatives from courts across Europe, all gathered to witness the treaty signing. And now, Before that could happen, they would witness her. Tiberius stood at the center of the room, hands clasped behind his back, expression calm. He caught her eye across the crowd and nodded once. "You can do this." Lord Draven stood to one side, looking insufferably smug. "Miss Grant," he called, "how good of you to join us. Are you ready to prove your courage? Or shall we dispense with the theatrics and proceed directly to the king's abdication?" "I'm ready," Genevieve said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Excellent," Draven said. "Then let us begin. The test is simple. You will approach the king. He will extend his fangs. You will touch them with your bare hands, maintaining contact for a count of 10 without flinching or pulling away. If you succeed, your consent is proven and the challenge is dismissed. If you fail," he smiled. "Well, we shall see." Genevieve stepped into the room. The crowd parted for her, creating a path to where Tiberius stood. She could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their attention. Some looked curious, some looked skeptical, a few looked actively hostile. She focused on Tiberius, on the calm in his eyes, the steadiness of his posture. He was not afraid. He trusted her. She could do this. She stopped a few feet from him, and he inclined his head in a small formal bow. "Miss Grant," he said, his voice carrying across the silent hall, "I'm going to extend my fangs now. You may approach at your own pace. I will not move unless you ask me to." He opened his mouth, and his fangs descended, sharp, white, gleaming, every predatory instinct in the world made visible. Genevieve's pulse hammered in her ears. Someone in the crowd shifted, a blur of motion in her peripheral vision, and she flinched, hard. Her whole body jerked, and a murmur ran through the hall. "She cannot do it," someone said. "Give her time," another voice countered. Genevieve closed her eyes, dragged in a breath, opened them again. Tiberius was still standing exactly where he had been, fangs extended, utterly motionless, waiting. She took a step forward, then another. The crowd was a pressure at her back, a presence she could not ignore. People were moving, whispering, and every small sound made her want to bolt. But she kept her eyes on Tiberius, on the silver of his gaze, on the trust she saw there. She reached up with shaking hands. "You are doing well," Tiberius said quietly, barely moving his mouth. "You are nearly there." Her fingers brushed his jaw. Cool skin, familiar now. She traced the line of his mouth, the edge of his lower lip, and then, carefully, she slid one fingertip up to touch the sharp point of his left fang. Cool, hard, dangerous. Someone in the crowd gasped. Genevieve held the contact, her hand trembling but steady enough. She moved to the second fang, touched the tip of it, felt the wicked sharpness under her skin. "1," Draven's voice said, starting the count. "2." Genevieve ran her finger along the curve of the fang, learning the shape of it. This was Tiberius. This was part of him. Not a weapon, just him. 3, 4. She cupped his jaw with her other hand, steadying herself. Tiberius's eyes never left hers. 5, 6. A door slammed somewhere in the hall, and Genevieve jerked, her hand slipping. The fang scraped against her fingertip, and she felt the bright sting of a cut. Blood welled up, a single red drop. The room went utterly silent. Genevieve stared at her finger, at the blood, and felt panic claw up her throat. She had failed. She had flinched, had pulled away, and now, "The count continues," Tiberius said clearly. She did not withdraw. The contact was maintained. "She flinched," Draven said. "She steadied," Tiberius countered. "The test allows for natural reflex. It forbids fear-driven retreat." She did not retreat. Genevieve looked at her bleeding finger, then back at Tiberius. His fangs were still extended, and there was a hunger in his eyes, now faint but present. The smell of her blood was in the air. Every vampire in the room could sense it. But he did not move, did not lunge, did not even lean toward her. He stayed exactly where he was, giving her space to choose. Genevieve pressed her bleeding fingertip directly against the tip of his fang. 7, she said clearly. 8, 9, 10. She held the contact for the full count, her blood smearing against the white enamel, and then slowly, deliberately, she withdrew her hand. The hall erupted. Some vampires were applauding, others were arguing, voices rising in a cacophony of debate. Draven looked furious, his expression twisted with rage. "She flinched!" he shouted. "She bled! That proves fear!" "That proves nothing," Tiberius said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "She completed the test. She touched my fangs, maintained contact through the count, and withdrew only when she chose to. Her consent is proven. Your challenge is dismissed." "The blood," Draven started. "The blood was an accident," Tiberius said, "caused by an external disturbance, not by her fear. She continued despite it. That is courage, Lord Draven, a concept you seem unfamiliar with." There was a ripple of laughter from the crowd. Draven's face went pale with anger. "This is not over," he said. "Yes," Tiberius said quietly. "It is. You have no grounds for challenge. The test has been passed, and if you continue to dispute it, I will consider that a personal insult. One I will be happy to address formally." The threat hung in the air. Draven stared at Tiberius for a long moment, then turned on his heel and stalked from the hall. A few of his supporters followed, but most of the crowd remained, watching. Tiberius turned to Genevieve. "Are you all right?" She looked down at her bleeding finger, then back at him. "I did it," she said. "I actually did it." "You did," he said, and the pride in his voice was unmistakable. "You were magnificent." He reached into his pocket and produced a clean handkerchief, wrapping it carefully around her finger. The gesture was so ordinary, so human, that Genevieve felt laughter bubble up in her chest. "I bled on your fangs," she said. "You did," he agreed, a smile tugging at his mouth. "I will treasure the memory." The crowd was dispersing now. The drama concluded. A few vampires stopped to congratulate Genevieve, to murmur words of respect. She accepted them in a daze, still half convinced this was not real. When the hall was finally empty, Tiberius took her uninjured hand and led her to a quiet alcove off the main room. "That was the bravest thing I have ever witnessed," he said quietly. "You faced your fear in front of 200 skeptics and proved them all wrong. I am—" He stopped, searching for words. "I am honored to know you." "I was terrified," Genevieve admitted. "I know," he said. "That is what made it brave." She leaned against him, letting his coolness seep into her skin. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, "we sign the treaty. We secure another century of peace, and then—" He hesitated. "And then we discuss the future, if you wish to." "What kind of future?" Genevieve asked. "The kind where you stay," he said. "Not as a contractor, not as an instrument keeper, but as—" He seemed to struggle with the words. "As mine, if you want that. I know it is complicated. I know I am asking you to tie yourself to a world that is dangerous and strange, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it now." Genevieve pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Are you asking me to stay in your court?" "I am asking you to stay in my life," he said. "Court, household, whatever shape that takes. I am asking you to be with me, for as long as you wish." "As a human?" she asked. He hesitated. "If that is what you choose, but there is another option, if you wanted it. Turning is a choice, Genevieve. It is not something I would ever force on you. But if you wanted to stay with me, truly stay, for centuries instead of decades, that door is open." Genevieve's heart kicked against her ribs. Immortality. The chance to be what he was, to have the speed and strength and endless time. The chance to never be the frightened one in the room again. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "You can take all the time you need," he said. "This is not a decision to make lightly. But you want me to," she said. "Stay. Be with you. Forever." "Yes," he said simply. "I want that more than I have wanted anything in a very long time." Genevieve kissed him again, softer this time, and let herself imagine it. A future measured in centuries instead of years. A life built beside this strange, careful, endlessly patient king. "Ask me again after the treaty signing," she said, "when all of this is settled, and I'll give you an answer." "I will wait," he said. The treaty signing went smoothly. The Hunters Guild representative, a stern woman named Karen with scars on her hands and a crossbow on her back, accepted the renewal terms without complaint. The peace would hold for another 100 years. Genevieve watched from the back of the room, still bandaged and slightly stunned. She had done this. Her courage had made this possible. When the formalities were concluded, Tiberius found her in the crowd and offered his arm. "Walk with me?" They walked through the court's lower levels, past the galleries and workrooms, past the sleeping chambers and storage vaults, until they reached a room Genevieve had never seen before. It was a workshop. Large, well-lit, filled with tools and workbenches and instruments in various states of repair. A piano stood in the corner, a beautiful old Bosendorfer that gleamed in the lamplight. "This was going to be a gift," Tiberius said, "regardless of what you decided. A proper workspace, just for you. You have been making do with borrowed corners for too long." Genevieve walked into the room, running her hands over the workbenches, the tools. Everything was new, high quality, chosen with care. "This is—" She stopped, overwhelmed. "This is too much." "It is exactly enough," he said. "You belong here, Genevieve. In this court, in my life. I want you to have a space that reflects that." She turned to face him, and the words came easier than she expected. "Ask me again." He crossed the room slowly, still always slowly, and took her hands in his. "Genevieve Grant," he said quietly, "will you stay with me? Will you build a life here, in this strange court beneath the city? Will you let me love you, for as long as you will have me?" "Yes," she said, "to all of it. Yes." He kissed her then, deep and fierce and full of promise, and Genevieve felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like home. "And the turning?" he asked when they finally broke apart. "Have you thought about it?" "I have," she said, "and I think I want it. I think I want to be fast, to be the one who moves too quickly for other people to track. I'm tired of being afraid. I want to be the thing that cannot be startled." Tiberius smiled, bright and joyful. "Then we will make it so," he said. "When you are ready. No rush. We have time." "How long does it take?" she asked. "The turning?" 3 days, he said. 3 days of change, and then you wake as one of us. It is not painless, but I will be with you the entire time. You will not be alone." "Soon then," Genevieve said. "I want to do it soon." They chose a night 2 weeks later, after Genevieve had said her goodbyes to the world above. She had quit her other jobs, closed out her apartment lease, written letters to her parents that tried to explain without revealing too much. She was moving to Europe permanently for work, she told them. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They were worried, but supportive. They did not need to know the rest. The turning itself was both easier and harder than she expected. Tiberius's venom in her veins felt like ice and fire at once, rewriting her from the inside out. She burned and froze and screamed, and through it all he held her hand and talked to her in that steady, patient voice. "You are doing beautifully," he said. "You are so strong. It is almost over." When she woke on the 4th day, the world was different, sharper, brighter. She could hear the blood moving through Tiberius's veins, could smell the age in the stone walls, could see variations in light and shadow that had been invisible before. And she was fast. She stood from the bed and crossed the room in a blur, laughing with the sheer joy of it. She was speed itself, untouchable, unstartled. Tiberius watched her with a smile. "How do you feel?" "Free," Genevieve said. "I feel free." They spent the next months learning her new body, her new abilities. She was fast, yes, but she was also strong and graceful and utterly in control. She did not flinch anymore, could not flinch. Her body had finally caught up to her courage. She kept the workshop, kept tuning the court's instruments. But now she also sat in on council meetings, learned the politics of the vampire world, became a fixture at Tiberius's side. The court accepted her quickly. She had proven herself in the most public way possible, and her transformation only solidified her place. Lord Draven stayed away. His challenge had failed, his reputation damaged. He would not trouble them again. And Genevieve was happy. She stood in her workshop one evening, tuning the old Bosendorfer, when Tiberius appeared in the doorway. "I am entering the workshop," he said, in that same careful cadence he had used when she was human. Genevieve laughed. "You don't have to do that anymore," she said. "I can handle speed now." "I know," he said, "but I like the ritual of it, and I like knowing that you never have to be afraid again." She crossed to him fast, so fast, reveling in the motion, and kissed him. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for seeing me when I was broken, for helping me heal, for loving me." "Thank you," he said, "for choosing to stay, for giving me a reason to remember why immortality can be beautiful." They stood together in the workshop, surrounded by instruments and tools and the life they had built, and Genevieve thought about the girl who had knelt in broken glass 8 months ago. The girl who had been so afraid of the world that she could not stop shaking. That girl was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who had touched a vampire's fangs and lived, someone who had chosen her own transformation, her own future, someone who was, finally, unafraid. The years folded into each other the way they did for immortals. Genevieve learned to navigate the strange rhythm of vampire time, where decades could blur together, but single moments stayed diamond sharp. She became known throughout the courts as the king's consort, the turned one who had proven her courage in front of the assembled houses. Her skill with instruments remained unmatched. Immortality had only sharpened her ears, deepened her understanding of resonance and tone. She and Tiberius ruled together, a partnership built on trust and patience and the kind of love that had all of eternity to deepen. They traveled to other courts, negotiated new treaties, weathered political storms, and the occasional challenge to their authority. But nothing shook them. They had survived Lord Draven's attempt to weaponize her trauma. Everything else was manageable by comparison. On the 15th anniversary of her turning, Tiberius took her back to the lower gallery where they had first truly talked. The old harpsichord was still there, still beautiful, still singing under her careful maintenance. "Do you remember," he said, "when I told you I enjoyed watching you work, that it was a sharp moment in the blur of time?" "I remember," Genevieve said. "Every moment with you is sharp now," he said. "Every day with you is a reason to pay attention. You have made eternity interesting again. That is a gift beyond measure." Genevieve leaned against him, listening to the silence of the gallery, the distant rumble of trams above. "I never thought I'd be here," she said. "Never thought I'd be happy again after the crash. After losing Daniel." "He would be proud of you," Tiberius said quietly, "of the person you have become." "I hope so," Genevieve said. And she meant it. The grief was still there, would always be there, a permanent scar, but it no longer defined her. She had built a life beyond it, a life full of music and love and purpose. She had survived. More than that, she had thrived. And when she looked at the centuries stretching ahead of her, she felt no fear, only anticipation, only joy, because she was fast now. Faster than fear, faster than trauma, faster than anything that had once held her back. And she was loved, deeply, completely, by a king who had learned to move slowly just for her, who had given her space to heal and time to choose and every reason to believe in herself again. That was worth everything. That was worth forever. They left the gallery hand in hand, moving through the court with the easy grace of immortals who had all the time in the world. Above them, Prague glittered in the autumn night, ancient and beautiful and utterly unaware of the love story unfolding in the hidden halls beneath its streets. And in the workshop, the Bosendorfer waited, perfectly tuned, ready for the next time Genevieve's hands would coax music from its ancient keys. Some things, after all, were meant to last forever.